from this day to that, for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. We'll kind of dive into Trump's speech here in a second. We're also going to cover something I've talked about quite a bit. We'll do that probably the second half, talking about higher education. Also, we'll cover a little bit about what's going on at the border. What gets me is a lot of these people that are pro, or anti-big government, have fallen into the pro-big government camp because they are blindly following Trump, thinking they're his savior. But what we might be finding out is, like many people have talked about, including Ron Paul, that, these things are double-edged swords. Yeah, a wall can keep people out, but it's also throughout history been used to keep people in. A border of control. So, and beyond that border, they don't have control. That's the whole point of the border. And even though I'm definitely, when we start flying immigrants in from countries that we are at the same time bombing, and we don't know, who these people are at all. We don't know if they're part of the people we're bombing or they're the people trying to get away from those people. And of course, if you have any humanity in you want the people that are just trying to live a life in peace to be able to do that. But at the same time, we can't do it in a naive way. If we're going to help refugees, we have to know that we're not bringing in enemy. Definitely when it's not like people look at, the border issue as the border. It's that people are being flown not only into the United States, but these people have flown to South America and are trying to get across the border. And there's, cases of finding, Middle Eastern, what was that, prayer Bible or something. But the simple fact is, this is a double-edged sword, and I'm going to share a little bit later something that the border control issue, when, you know, you're anti-TSA and all this, then how can you be for a stronger border control? Well, this is going to start affecting that, and you're going to see it sooner than later. But let's go ahead and dive into some on Trump's speech. We'll first start off with the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Ron's tweet storm was Trump's speech libertarian, and then depending on how I feel, I might play a couple excerpts of his speech. But let's go ahead and just dive into this Ron Paul Liberty Report first.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. I know you watched the speech last night as well as I did, and that was a chore for me because I generally don't enjoy watching those speeches and enjoy really attending, I have to confess, even when I was in the Congress, because they were so ritualistic and so canned. But I did listen to it last night, and a lot of other people did, and I thought it was important because in a way it is a historic speech. Things are different now. Conditions are so bad. People are very angry. It's a worldwide event, and people are very hopeful that since Trump is different, that he would come up with some answers, and there's still a lot of optimism there. Today, the stock market is at super record high, so everything superficially looks like it's going quite well. But I listened carefully, did a little tweeting last night, and tried to get the perspective from a libertarian, out there, because that, of course, has been my goal for many, many decades. I've never been somebody that I thought I was even running for office to enhance a typical republicanism or typical economic policies that we've had. I want to always see change. So I was anxiously, wanting to listen carefully and see what kind of good things I could find and maybe gently but firmly criticize the things that I think are going in the wrong direction.
And I think everyone saw your tweets, and people have commented on. Bob Wenzel commented on them, and then I looked at all the comments under your tweets, and I think a lot of people missed the point, which was, as you said, you were tweeting as a libertarian. Yes or no is what he said, libertarian. So people said, Ron, get with the program, or why are you always bashing? It's not about bashing Trump. It's about the principles that you pointed out. So I pulled up a few of your tweets to put you on the hot seat. You got to defend them.
Okay.
And as usual, when you go down the rabbit hole, let's start with the end. Start with the conclusion. And if we can actually, let's put a couple of things up here. Your final tweet was your final grade. Final grade on the libertarian scale, plan strategy F, overall D-. You also had another little report card where you said his vision for the U.S. at the 250th anniversary, A-. Oh, his methods to achieve it, an F.
See, that's a mixed bag, because I loved his conclusion of his goals, because in a way, very similar to what I would like to see. I imagine there aren't very many Americans could listen to his goals on what we should have in America. Coming together in a healthy economy and everybody getting what they need in peace. He didn't say we need more war or any of these things. So I would say that was a wonderful statement, and that's why he got an A for that. But I think that whole thing, that issue has existed for a long time, because I think the whole time I was in Congress, that was the goal of most people. I've never heard somebody come up, I want to create unemployment. The whole thing boils down to, what are your policies? What are you doing? Are you changing it? Or how do you achieve this? But if we can agree on the goal, then it's back in the court of everybody involved. I think most important are the ideological issues views, the philosophic positions that we take that make the difference, because that translates into what the politicians do. So this to me was the most important, and I just didn't hear the things necessary, and sometimes things change. I know that he wants to lower taxes, and that certainly is good, but if you don't cut spending, what if the debt goes up? Will we rely on the Federal Reserve to print the money? And of course, that is the case. So I didn't find a lot of changes in great detail. Even the things on foreign policy where I had been more hopeful, I thought he was backing away a little bit, and that he wasn't as anxious to be friends with Russia. He didn't mention Russia. He didn't mention the Federal Reserve. He didn't mention a lot of things that I thought are crucial. And I guess one thing from a libertarian viewpoint is that the main purpose of government for a libertarian is the protection and the recognition of individual liberty and the rejection of the non-aggression principle, where nobody can commit aggression, including the government. See, that just seems to be a great distance from almost every Republican and every Democrat. Not every Republican, because we know a few that understand this, but basically what we look at is pragmatism, which fits into utilitarianism and economic policy. You do whatever the whim of the day is. If you have a problem here, do this, and not looking at it from a philosophic long-term approach. So therefore, I didn't see, wow, this is great. Libertarianism was on the rise. I happen to believe libertarian is on the rise, and that things are doing very well outside of the political structure. And that's the most important place anyway, where people, and especially young people now, are starting to understand what libertarian is all about. And that's where I'm encouraged, but I didn't hear it last night. That to me was disappointing. We should talk more about exactly how we can reach those goals that he so clearly stated what we should be striving for in this country.
So in short, it's not about you like him or you hate him. It's about the issue. That's a philosophy, Eddie. He looked good. Great suit. I think he gave a very smooth speech. He was the rough edges seemed to be, honed down a little bit.
And the establishment liked him, more. I mean, otherwise the markets wouldn't be soaring. His approach, he wasn't as he wasn't chewing out the media, and he wasn't looking for a fight. He was truly trying to have a presentation which was more accommodating. And so if you take that away from real policy, then you say, well, he looked better, and it looks like he wants to talk to people. But that, again, is, yes, you talk to people if you can agree on the right ideas.
Well, speaking of ideas, let's look at a few things that you pointed out in the speech. And this is not in chronological order. We just sort of put a few of them up here to talk about what he said and where you might have some differences. Let's look at the next one if we can. Great Wall on the southern border, which is something he talked about, hopefully not to keep us in. Reduce incentives to illegally cross and change foreign policy. Problem solved. This is the immigration issue, of course.
Yes, and, I would think a good libertarian, when you talk about walls, they'd be very hesitant. Why is there going to be a wall? There is a problem, but maybe the problem is a symptom of the real problem. And I think that's what immigration is all about, and the walls are all about the problems that we have. And it's a symptom, and it can be scapegoated and said everything is, due to immigrants coming in. That doesn't mean that I take a position that we shouldn't have, watch who's coming in, but just building a wall, practically, I think it's not likely to happen. The costs are going to be skyrocketing, and all the practical reasons why it's not likely to happen. But the whole idea of having a wall just doesn't make sense. But what doesn't make sense to me is, why don't we look at why we have so much immigration? And Trump said a little bit about this, and that is improve the environment here for business people so our economy is better, because we wouldn't be so resentful of somebody coming in. A truly free market and a good economy, you need people to come in because you're always looking for more labor. But instead, we mess up the economy, people come in, conditions are much worse in Central and South America. They come in, but we also now we put the American people in jeopardy. They're having tough time. So we take from them either inflation or debt or taxes in order to give a subsidy to the people who come in and say, well, you come in and we guarantee you your rights and your right to an education and free medical care and a job and all of this. And so it's an incentive for them to come. Then you also have to talk about why is there a need for vetting? Well, maybe some bad guys are coming in. There's people who are angry at us. Why are they angry at us? They weren't angry at us, for decades, but they're angry at us now, especially in the last 15 years, because we've been invading their country. We've been bombing them. So that's why I mentioned two things, no incentives and change our foreign policy. And I might not be so bold to say all problems are solved with the click of your fingers, but I'll tell you what, it would solve a lot of our problems, go a long way if we just had a different approach and not get distracted by finding a scapegoat and said a wall is going to solve our problem and then become almost obsessed with this wall. And I just don't think that's an answer to very much.
You sound like a doctor. You want to treat the disease and not the symptoms.
Yeah.
We have another one now, if we can get it up here. He talked about infrastructure a lot. $1 trillion he wants to spend for infrastructure. But as you point out, the Treasury is empty. No money in the bank. The answer, probably just print more. Same old, you said.
And this is very, very popular. So if you're a politician that needs to worry about the next election, you don't want to challenge that because you're getting Democrats in on this. The Democrats love this. Infrastructure, very good. But there is no money in the bank. If he does it and the people go along with it, they're going to have to borrow the money. And if there's not enough money out there to borrow, they'll just print the money. And I think the infrastructure should be looked at, but I don't think it was ever meant to be a federal government involvement. Matter of fact, they cite, because of this talk, we haven't done this since Eisenhower. It's interesting that when Eisenhower wanted to do this, he built these superhighways, which we all agree, enjoy. But the whole thing is that he recognized that he didn't have the constitutional authority to do it. That was back in the old days, they didn't have the authority to prohibit the drinking of alcohol, so they amended the Constitution.
Yeah.
Back then, Eisenhower had to, at least on the surface, look like he was paying attention to the Constitution. So he says, this is for national security reasons, and everybody knows that was just the excuse. So, but that argument is not going to come up. It is assumed that the federal government is going to take care of the highways, but it is going to be part of the problems that we face when the dust settles. The deficit, I believe, unless we have some miracle happen, is going to explode. And this will be one reason, because this is one thing is bipartisan. The Republicans are going to love this. The Democrats are going to love this. The Democrats will vote for it. The Republicans get to distribute the money, pass out the money first to their friends, and this sort of thing. So I think it's another political tool that is used to get more political power and political support, but it has nothing to do with solving our problems. Matter of fact, I think unless you deal with the deficit and where that money comes and how it harms our economy and the future generations, this is going to be very detrimental.
Well, the next one is one of the trickiest ones, and this is one where you took a lot of criticism. And it was a poignant moment in the speech, and this is where President Trump pointed out the widow of the Navy SEAL that was killed in the Yemen raid. And this is the tweet that caused a lot of discussion on your Twitter feed, some supporting you and some others not supporting you. Warmongering is alive and well, tragically. Focus on the widow. What a terrible use of tragedy for political purposes.
Well, this is a tough one. It came up in the debates, the presidential debates, because they brought a widow there. Somebody had died in the Middle East and presented the same case. And of course, I gave the same answer that I try. You can't do it in a few words. But to me, it's so sad and so tragic to see somebody like that suffering so. And I assume that it's a tough situation for everybody, because you can't tell the truth from the political viewpoint, because the truth is he shouldn't have died.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have died. We shouldn't have been there. We shouldn't have had that raid that didn't do any good. But in order to remove any guilt feeling from the people who sent them over there, or a family, you know, if you say, well, this was a stupid war and he shouldn't have done it, you mean I lost my loved one? Yeah. So I think anti-war people are way more sympathetic in understanding this than the warmongers, because the warmongers say, this is for national defense, this is for the Constitution and liberty, and this is patriotism, and therefore, you know, it's good and wonderful. So if you're anti-war and think war should only be fought when a war is declared, to me, I think our empathy is so much greater, and yet the patriotism card is played on this. So the families, it'd just be horrible to accept. Not all of them do, because some of them turn and say, hey, maybe this was unnecessary. And even in this family, that might have been the case. So this to me is the other thing, the politicians who endorse the war. The Congress is responsible. The presidents, both of them, are responsible for this particular raid. They can't say, we made a mistake. They can't do that. They have to build up this super support for war, even if it's an illegal, unconstitutional war. So they have to do this. And then, of course, there's another sinister force that has to make sure that there's no criticism of this, is the military-industrial complex. They may be in for it for profits, but they sure don't want to get people thinking, well, you know, maybe these lives would be saved if we did do it. And it reminds me of a very important story, because one person that conservatives look up to, and that is Ronald Reagan. And I remember this well because I was involved in the debate and really pleading for Reagan not to put the troops in Lebanon, in Beirut, and bring them home. And, of course, the tragedy was somebody with a suicide bomb came in and killed 242 Marines. And maybe it was settled enough, but he said anything, well, they were doing their duty, protecting the Constitution and our national security. But the greatest thing that I think that Reagan did was when he wrote his memoirs, he said, you know, about the Marines being killed. He says, I made a tragic mistake. He says, I had no idea how crazy and how foolish the hatreds are in that country. Irrational is the word that he used. And he said that he should have been more neutral in that war. And he said, unbelievable statement. He said, you know, if I'd have done the right thing, those Marines would still be alive today. Now, that is sort of the way I see things when I see people dying. You know, it just tears me up. The person who doesn't want the war is the anti-war and have it only for strict defensive purposes. When people die, you know, we've lost 10,000 people here. So this is one example which they're played on. I think they're using people for political reasons, not in strictly an evil way. It's just that that's the way it comes together, because they believe these wars are really necessary. At least they convince most of the American people that these wars are necessary. So that, to me, is a tragic example of what can happen, and also one of the most difficult things, to handle politically. But, you know, I had that position during the time I was running for office in Congress, and I never thought that people, and I'd go to the veteran groups and talk the same way, and I think they understood what I was talking about. And most people are anti-war, but they are so want to justify it and make an excuse for it. So that is one of the reasons why I have this position, and I understand very well why people would want to challenge it.
Yeah, they transfer the nobility of the warrior onto the nobility of the cause. It was kind of a cynical ploy, because talking about the horrors of the Yemen war is now off the table.
Yeah, and that's all, you know, like hides the whole issue. Look how long they had to sort it out on the Bay of Pigs and things like that, and who caused what. And right now they're still arguing, was this a great raid in Yemen? They're still saying, some people are still saying, oh, it was good. We got a lot of information, all this. So they're hiding from the truth.
Yeah. So I'll switch gears now, and this is something that was a little bit more optimistic. Reducing corporate taxes, great idea, but you must also cut spending. Otherwise, disaster.
Well,
a little praise, a little criticism there.
Yeah, I love cutting taxes. And matter of fact, my position when I had to vote, if there was a tax cut bill that came up, I would always vote for it, even if there was a chance it would raise the deficit, because taxes, no matter what, they have to be paid for. So I would always vote to cut taxes, and the deficit is, the spending is a different issue. We should be talking about spending, and that's the real culprit. You know, even a balanced budget, if the budget is too high, it's still damaging because the government's taking too much resources out of it. But now they talk about tax cuts, and then they talk about revenue neutral. You know, if they cut here, they have to raise over here, or it's not considered revenue neutral. And then there's a group of economists that the politicians love. There's pseudo-Keynesians, and they say, well, with dynamic scoring, if we cut our taxes this much, the economy, instead of growing 2%, is going to grow 4% and produce more revenues. And that's going to solve the problem. But they don't deal with that. Superficially, I agree with the people who love tax cuts. I'd vote for the tax cut, but I will continue to emphasize that the problem is big government spending, whether it's infrastructure or wars we don't need or the welfare state. It goes on and on. We need to decide one important thing. What should the role of government be? And that role should be the defense of liberty.
Okay, we'll do a final one. This is kind of your summation of the speech. You know, this is one of the last tweets you did. You said, "He never said audit the Fed, no spending cuts, more foreign intervention. The word liberty was not mentioned once."
That's my disappointment, because the most important thing for a government is to protect liberty. It is conceded to most politicians that they only have to talk about safety nets economically, and of course, safe from the bad guys coming to get us, rather than thinking about the purpose of government is to provide liberty, because liberty is what provides for us economically, and it is the concept of liberty and minding our own business and staying out of the internal affairs of the nation that will bring about peace. So my goal has always been, you know, to promote liberty, and believing justifiably that liberty is the solution to most of our problems, and that's what we should strive for, and that means government would be very limited. So yes, I was disappointed in that area, because my ears perk up when they start talking about, I'm going to make you safe. Well, you know, people can be made safe if they can be turned into, protective beings, where you can be safe if you're a prisoner. You know, you can be a slave and be safe, but you don't want, safety shouldn't be the main goal. But does that mean you give up safety? No, I believe in a free society, you are going to be more safe. Then when the government gets involved and gets us involved in these conflicts, and they undo the economy and give us all these problems. So one mistake goes to another one. I think the basic problem is we've lost a lot of confidence in ourselves as a people. And that's why I like Trump's last statement, because when he was saying these things about how things should be on our 250th anniversary, of course, my wheels turn, and that's precisely what I think about all the time. And how would that come about? And it doesn't come about by spending more money, more militarism, more involvement overseas, print more money, support the Federal Reserve, attack civil liberties, more drug wars, all this going on. That has just the opposite of what libertarianism is all about, and it's the opposite of what I personally believe. And really, I truly believe it's essentially opposite of what the founders had hoped that we would have eventually in this country, and it's not the case. Today, we have too much government and too little concern about our personal liberties. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Make sure you go there and subscribe on YouTube. Now, when we look at the scope of Trump's speech, in some ways, he tried to play the unifying voice, even though he knew Democrats wouldn't agree with certain things he said. I don't want to get into the whole, oh, they were his, blah, let's focus on the message that he was trying to convey. And I heard someone talking about how there was the anti-globalist message. And let me state that I am an anti-globalist when I look at what a lot of the global elite want to accomplish with globalism. I'm against that. But at the same time, when we look at the nationalist side of it, whether it be national socialism or national fascism or communism, I personally go, well, if you're truly going to be a nationalist, we would have to look at the Constitution. And you can't have a national fascism, a national socialism under that Constitution with that Bill of Rights. If we're truly going to have a nationalism, we do need the liberty. So the things that Ron Paul brought up, about the wall, about no talk of spending cuts, even though he did talk about lowering taxes, but, at a corporate rate, is that really going to be what we would like to see? Everyone needs tax cuts. I believe he did say the middle class, I want to say he talked about that. But there's also things that we have to be careful when we look at, the nationalist movement. What we want is sovereignty as a free society. That means not only do we not want foreign governments telling us what to do or a global entity telling us what to do, we don't want a federal government telling us what to do. And then you go full libertarian, you don't want any type of government agency having the ability to tell you what to do, that you believe in a natural right that, if you're living your life, not harming yourself, using your property as you choose without harming others, that you have the right to live that life. So we have to be careful by going, we're with him because he's anti-globalist. I believe in the, anti-globalist movement. I don't know where Steve Bannon lies on this, but from what I've seen from Breitbart, it seems more leaning towards fascist. Not saying that that's what they believe in, but that's what it seems to lean towards when you look at a lot of Breitbart. So my question is Bannon running this or is Trump running this, and where does Trump stand? Does he truly believe in, bringing us back to a constitutional federal government? And what I've heard from Bannon, he uses speech that's very tricky if you don't pay attention and you just kind of take a more of a overlook of what he says. I can see where people think, oh, look, he wants to limit the federal government. But what does he want from that? What it seems to me is it's not that he wants to limit the federal government. What it seems to me is he wants to basically limit how many people get a say in what happens, meaning bypass Congress, get rid of people when they're not doing what you need them to do. It's just simple, we're going to accomplish this with or without you. What is that? And does it truly limit the federal government, or does it just put the power into the president's hand and even take it more to a authoritarian type of control? Because even if Trump doesn't become some crazy out of control authoritarian, you create a position for the next president. And the position's been kind of already brought up to this level from past presidents. And I think that's where we should look at how a lot of these so-called anti-globalist agenda or national sovereignty agendas are played out. Now, I mentioned one about, looking at how border, control might play out. I got an article here from Jeffrey Tucker at liberty.me. Welcome aboard, but first, U.S. Marshals will scan your retina. For some 15 years, airport security has become steadily more invasive. There are ever more checkpoints, ever more requests for documents as you make your way from the airport entrance to the airplane. And, me personally, I remember not having a passport, just using ID and a copy of my birth certificate, and I was fine. Don't understand, how any of this made us safer, but whatever. How about we just stop bombing countries and then purposely flying in the people that flood for refugee status in the countries that are bombing them? Says here, passengers adapt to the new changes as they come, but my latest flight to Mexico originating in Atlanta presented all passengers with something I had never seen before. Like everyone else, I complied. What was my choice? We had already been through boarding pass checks, passport checks, scanners, and pat-downs. At the gate, each passenger had already had their tickets scanned, and we were all walking on the jet bridge to board. It's at this point that most people assume that it's all done. Finally, we can enjoy some sense of normalcy. This time was different. Halfway down the jet bridge, there was a new layer of security. 2 U.S. Marshals, heavily armed and dressed in dystopian-style black regalia, stood next to an upright machine with a glowing green. Every passenger, one by one, was told to step on a mat and look into the green scanner. It was scanning our eyes and matching that scan with the passport, which was also scanned yet again. Like everyone else, I complied. What was my choice? I guess I could have turned back at that point, declined to take the flight I had paid for, but it would be unclear what would then happen. After standing there for perhaps 8 seconds, the machine gave the go signal and I boarded. I talked to a few passengers about this, and others were just as shaken by the experience. they were reticent even to talk about it. Also, people tend to be confronted with something like this, or as people tend to be when confronted with something like this. I couldn't find anyone who had ever seen something like this before. I wrote friends who traveled internationally, and none said they had ever seen anything like this. I will tell you how it made me feel like a prisoner in my own country. It's one thing to control who comes into a country, but surveilling and permissioning American citizens as they leave their own country, even as they are about to board, is something else. Where is the toggle switch that would have told the machine not to let me board? And who controls it? How prone is it to bureaucratic errors? What happens to my scan now? Who has access to it? The scene reminded me of movies I've seen like Hunger Games or 1984. It's chilling and strange, even deeply alarming to anyone who has ever dreamed of what freedom might be like. Doesn't look like this. Why now? I've searched the web for some evidence that this new practice has been going on for a while, and I just didn't notice. I find nothing about it. I've looked to find some new order, maybe left over from the Obama administration. That is just now being implemented, but I find nothing. The only change I find has to do with new rules for Homeland Security just imposed by the Trump administration. They make deportation vastly easier for the government. I have no idea if these rules are the culprit for the intensified immigration checks. What people don't often consider is that every rule that pertains to immigration ultimately applies to immigration as well. Every rule that government has to treat immigrants a certain way also necessarily applies to citizens as well. Chandran, lost my spot here. Chandran Kukatis is right when he says that controlling immigration means controlling everyone. Regulating immigration is, this is a quote, regulating immigration is not just about how people arrive, but what they do once they have entered a country. It is about controlling how long people stay, where they travel, and what they do. Most of all, it means controlling whether or not and for whom they work, paid or unpaid, what they accept in financial remuneration, and what they must do to remain in employment for as long as that is permitted. Yet this is not possible without controlling citizens and exiting residents who must be regulated, monitored, and policed to make sure that they comply with immigration laws. To be sure, unquote, to be sure, there might have been some tip-off that security officials received that triggered this special measure for this flight only. Maybe they were looking for something, someone in particular. Maybe this was a one-time thing and will not become routine. The point is that it happened without any change in the laws or regulations. Whatever the reason, it was some decision made by security. It can happen on any flight for any reason, and who is in charge of making that decision? Think of it. There might be no getting out of the country without subjecting yourself to this process. On the plane, finally, my mind raced through the deeper history here. Passports, as we know them, are only a little over a century old. In the 19th century, the hypothesis of the liberal age, there were no passports. You could travel anywhere in the world through whatever means you could find. Nationalism unleashed the World War I, ended that. And here we are today, with ever more controls seeming to follow Orwell's blueprint for how to end whatever practical freedoms we have left. And we are going this way despite the absence of any real crisis, any imminent threat. The driving force seems to be this: our own government's desire to control every aspect of our lives. Think of it. There might be no getting out of the country without subjecting yourself to this process. It is a digital Berlin Wall. This is what it means to put security ahead of freedom. You get neither. And, you know, when I first read this, the first thing that came to mind was the biometric collection going on in India, where they went around, and IBM was a part of this. And I talked about IBM and other, media, whether it be, social media or, tech companies, and how they tend to get involved with the government. And IBM was over in India, and the government and IBM supplied the things. And IBM, and wasn't there IBM and Hitler connection? But that's history. So IBM did the biometric of India, basically all of India. Iris scans, thumbprints. I can't remember. I know they got, photos, iris scan, thumbprint. I can't remember if they took DNA. I can't remember. But, that happened. That was, years ago, or a couple of years. IBM wouldn't, have any reason to work with this government to biometric scan people. And, let's just say this is stuff going through my head. And I'm going, well, they tested it. This was a test. Anybody that knows Jeffrey Tucker, he's, freedom. He's the one that he's worked with Mises Institute, started Liberty.me, writes articles over at Foundation for Economic Education. I was down there 2013 in Indy with them during the Midwest of Liberty Summit. When you think of, that anarcho or libertarian type person, that's Jeffrey Tucker. And he submitted to it. They tested it. I'm pretty sure probably we're not hearing about anybody that refused it. And kind of pause for a second, but if you guys lose me, it's because we have extremely high winds outside, constant high wind, and then extreme gusts. It sounds like my roof is about to be ripped off. So just know we could have a tree down or something knock out power, and you'll probably hear a loud beeping when my battery backup starts running out of juice, which won't take long. But back to this, he didn't refuse it, and he knows to recognize something from this. This is not freedom. Now, what if they make this routine to get on an airplane? Well, a lot of people travel, or even if they don't travel a lot, would like to, go on a vacation sometime, maybe travel. Well, if they take a plane, they might be subject to this. We already know that train stations, bus stations, they want TSA there. They're trying to slowly expand it where that becomes as normal as on an airline at the airports. So they bring TSA to that. Then we've also heard of these, checkpoints that they been kind of testing out, or, whether they be for some of the reasons that they explain, trying to catch drugs in semis, or, people's cars. At the checkpoint, they can x-ray them. Of course, they get the person out of the vehicle. But, they want to make like drive-through x-ray scanners for the highways. When we start checkpointing every mode of transportation, and then things like retina scans become the norm for these type of checkpoints, they don't have to do what India basically did. They can accomplish a lot more. So that's my fear through a lot of these measures. And, that's not saying Trump would want things like this, but will he be convinced to set things in motion that will get to that point? And it might not be something that you should feel threatened about because he wouldn't use it on someone like you, but what about the next person? What about when he starts doing things maybe that you dislike, and then you speak out about it and you become a target? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's something that no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you should understand, because that has played true throughout history. So when I hear, big government things being touted, and you have these people that were speaking out about Obama and big government, but then will, clap their hands for big government things when it's their side. I wonder if it's being naive or unintelligent or kind of swept up in the moment. I'm sure there's different reasons all around, and I think a lot of it also has just come down to people feel threatened by the globalism, and they're hurting. People want jobs back in America. People want to work. People want to be productive. People want to better their lives. They want to be able to work to something. And if he can drop regulation in a way that doesn't just benefit big corporate America, something that allows the little guy to get up, on his feet as that little mom and pop store, that's where we should focus. Deregulate where that, put measures in that, even if you don't want to completely deregulate that, these small companies that our 3-person company don't have to be burdened by these regulations. And I'm not talking about things that say, hey, you can't dump oil in the river. You know, that's kind of common sense. You're on other people. You're abridging other people's rights. That's unconstitutional. You are knowingly doing that. So we have to really look at that as where we can start when it comes to stopping the hurt here in America when it comes to our economy. Because I know a lot of smart people, but they're going, I can't afford to actually, you know, do what I want. I might be able to get the equipment and all that, but to afford, you know, the lawyer and all this, and, you know, there isn't a great job that pays me enough to not only put, you know, the roof over my head and the food on my plate, but also, you know, help my credit or fix my credit. I'm afraid to take out a credit card or anything because, you know, what happens to the economy? It's not doing awesome. It's holding on, but what does that truly mean? And no one trusts the stock market anymore. And that was kind of one interesting thing, you know, he brought up, Trump did in his speech. And I'm like, that means nothing, Trump. We already know that. That's, you know, expectation or confidence or just plain hope, but it's not a reflection on what's actually going on right now. That's yet to be seen. Okay, we're going to kind of move on a little bit here. Give me a minute here. Sorry, I'm having a little issue. Hope my internet, yeah, it's still up. Okay, get my browser back up now. Okay, I want to talk about, you know, when we're talking about this, we're talking about where is society, where we're going to go. And I don't believe a lot of people are stupid, but then, one, I've talked to plenty of people, and really the lack of information on reality is amazing. Like, even the stuff that we learned in school, even if it was a little whitewashed, they have no sense of reality when it comes to history. Their history comes from comedy shows and magazines and MTV. That's the gist of what it seems that I get when I see these people and talk to them, and it's like, and it's not everybody. I'm also meet a lot of people that even if they aren't, you know, that well educated when it comes to facts and history, they understand something's wrong, and they have the common sense to research things and understand things when questions are brought up. And they've slowly been just teaching themselves. But I want to play this short Mark Dice clip and talk about it. And this is the common sense test.
Mount Rushmore located in?
I don't know.
Green American?
Yeah.
American. Okay, I'm going to have to revoke your citizenship.
Okay.
Where is Trump Tower located?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Nah, man.
Where's Donald Trump from? Where does he live?
I don't know where he lives.
Just generally, where does he live?
I have no idea.
If you could tell Donald Trump something about your tampons, what would you say to him?
They're definitely a necessity. They're not something that needs to be banned at all. I don't know for sure, but I don't think he would use an executive order to ban tampons because, one, that just sounds preposterous to me because they're kind of a necessity. They're not a luxury at all. And I can tell you that from many, many years of experience that there's nothing luxurious about having your period and needing to use a tampon.
You might have seen the Donald Trump kids are big hunters. They go on these hunting trips just for fun and kill these poor animals. So now, just getting people's reactions to Donald Trump's kids now killing the Triceratops in Africa on a hunting expedition.
Okay, so honestly, my opinion is I think they're just getting away with a lot for the simple fact that they're Donald Trump's children.
Would an ordinary person be able to get away with killing a Triceratops, or is the Donald Trump's kids just being able to get away with that because they're Donald Trump's kids?
I think they're getting away with it because they're Donald Trump's kids, and I think anybody else would just get in trouble, and they're honestly, just, I don't know,
with
jail time.
Animal rights activists.
Yeah, they'll pay a fine for it, and they'll serve their time in jail and
for killing the Triceratops. I think it's an endangered species in some countries, so it makes it even worse.
Yeah, but I agree.
All right, thank you very much. We want to know how many stars are on this flag.
51. All right.
What do the stars represent?
They represent. Let's see. Is it the?
You don't physically count. It's like a quiz.
It's something about the states, right? All right.
Something about the states.
Each state, but there's not 51. You guys are gonna make me look stupid.
How many states are there? What's the last book you read?
I don't read books, man. I'm pretty stupid.
Well, thanks for demonstrating that. It's all over social media. You probably saw Princess Diana passed away this morning over in London, and we're just getting people's comments on the loss that they're facing. Died of a heart attack.
Wow, that's gnarly.
Princess Diana gone at the age of 35.
That's depressing. I'll keep her in my prayers.
What's your favorite memory of Princess Diana?
It was gnarly that she was princess, and that's cool.
Probably saw on the news that this morning the hunters did capture what they have called the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie.
Really?
And we're just asking people if they think Nessie should be set free. Is that really fair to keep her in captivity like this?
No, I think they should just let Nessie free. I mean, well, supposedly if they found her, like, that's messed up to keep an animal, like, captured.
Probably didn't check the news.
No.
It's like, there's occasionally the marine biologists will find these old animals that have thought to have been extinct, and so they did capture the Loch Ness Monster, 17-foot long Platysaurus. And a lot of people are saying that it's really unfair to keep Nessie in captivity. Do you think we should let her back into the wild?
Yeah, I think because it's like, animal rights, like it's the same thing as humans, like let them be free, because it's like not right, as I said, that to keep, a special being, like a special animal, like keep and like show them off to people. It's like, no, let the animal be free and let other people enjoy the view and let it be in nature, basically. So
what's your reaction to the discovery and the capture?
I'm actually surprised because I didn't even know it because I'm not from here, so I never really watched the news, and I'm just surprised that they found Loch Ness monster, but they should let
her go free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, that's what we thought too.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You are.
Do you think that we should have nuked China last week, or do you think that we should have maybe taken them to the United Nations over their currency manipulation? You think dropping those nuclear weapons over there was the right thing to do?
I don't think so, but I don't really know the situation either.
You want to elaborate on that?
I don't know what happened.
Well, China has been manipulating their currency, and so we went and dropped a nuclear bomb on Shanghai last week in retaliation for that. You think that was inappropriate, or?
I don't think that was right. No, I don't think so. I think they should have just talked it out. Everybody comes
Talked
together.
it out before dropping the nuke on China last week.
Mm-hmm.
Every year, there's new words that become popular. Working, selfie. And in order to make room for those words in the dictionary so it doesn't get to be 3,000 pages, the dictionary companies remove older words that aren't used as much. One of the words they're taking out for the next edition is gullible. Do you think that's an old-fashioned word? Do you think that's one of the words that should have been removed to make...
No, some people still be acting gullible. Yeah. We still use it.
Any comments on the dictionary companies choosing to remove the word gullible from next year's editions?
They should probably get more people's opinions and surveys and see how they feel about it. I mean, what other word can you replace with gullible besides I mean, what new word would you come up with besides gullible?
So you think they should have done a survey to see if the people decide that gullible should be removed from the dictionary?
Of course.
So you disagree with them removing?
Yes, we disagree. Do not remove the word gullible. Yeah. Because a lot of people are still gullible and we still use the word.
A lot of people are still gullible.
Yeah.
Quite obvious. All right, well, we're just getting some opinions on the new dictionary controversy.
Okay.
Thanks for your thoughts on that.
Thank you. Bye.
That was Mark Dice on YouTube. Go check him out. Subscribe to his channel because he's got just archives of these videos. You think that this would be something that, you'll catch people here. No, look at how many comedians now do it. On the street type stuff was kind of a alternative type deal. Not saying that other people haven't done it, but in the way that he's done it has been very, I don't even know how to describe it. He's played with, here's what's going on and here's why we're having a problem with it. And now you're starting to see that come out of other people that are doing on the street type things. And, I've talked in the past about how do we get a candidate like Trump elected? Well, a lot of it's due to our political history. You have two Bushes that a lot of people didn't like. You had a Clinton that, even though the liberals love to tout him as a success, there's a lot of conservatives, gun lovers, and others that didn't like him. And then you want to run another Clinton. We already did 2 Bushes. Evidently, in the primaries, we didn't want another Bush. If it wasn't for super delegates, would Clinton have even got the nomination? You run that type of deal to get it. And I talked about how it reminded me of the movie Idiocracy. And even though it's not full blown like Idiocracy, there's definitely similarities. But what even made me go, okay, we're even going further down that path. I don't really use Drudge Source as my only source for information because I know, Matt Drudge pits articles that go along with, his view and his agenda or whatever. Doesn't mean I always disagree with them. Doesn't mean I agree with them. But I like to go there just to see what he's posting. What's on his mind? What does he see? And then right now at the top of Drudge, yes, she can. Oprah rethinking if she could be president. And I'm going, this has to be some type of matrix and dream I'm living in. First Trump and then Oprah. And, play the Oprah card. We might have a little problem on our hands. And then out of the Hollywood Reporter, will Disney's Bob Iger run for president in 2020? And then we also know that Adam Kokesh has talked about running for Libertarian candidate for 2020. And I'm going, we're really just, have we gone off the deep end? Does anybody feel that our society has really just gone off the deep end? It's like feel like I'm walking around in like the Clueless movie or something. Or another one of those stupid comedies with the stupid people. I feel like I'm just walking around and I'm like, I'm seeing Ditsos like, am I the only one disconnected from the Matrix? It's like they're all walking around with chips in their head, but it's actually in their hand. And even though I use, social media and the extent of it, I don't let it control how I think and feel, even though I even keep up with pop culture. It doesn't influence me. It doesn't make me go, it's cool to be a liberal. Let me be, cool and be a Bernie Sanders supporter. And I actually seen that people that, I'm a Ron Paul supporter. Now I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, or I'm a Trump supporter. And it's just like, they're not doing it because they're trying to stand for a principle. They're doing it because it's trendy or because of an emotion. And kind of like what Tucker said in that, it feels like 1984, where the big screen comes on and everybody, yeah. Except it's not Trump getting on there and just riling his people. It's that social media and mainstream media are also playing another card. And no one's critically thinking. Now, I know this not to be true. I have enough people that I know that are, free thinkers, libertarian, or even just anarchist, or, not the anarchist, socialist, whatever they call themselves. I'm talking about true, limited to no government type. But they don't believe in rioting and all that. Protesting is one thing, rioting's another. And again, a lot of this kind of has been proven to go back towards, you look at the whether it be public education or the higher education. And that kind of brings me to an article here I found from Foundation for Economic Education. And this one was titled, Selling Higher Education is Sleazier Than Selling a Used Car. And this just makes me think, because when I was sold on college, and then the time I got to college, the person that sold me on that college already had a nickname. And that was the Lion Hawaiian, because he kind of looked Hawaiian. I don't know if he was or not. But here it says, in a previous life, I worked in sales. But not just your everyday run-of-the-mill brand of sales. I worked in a sleazy industry that championed predatory lending practices and distorted the pricing of its lackluster product, which often sent my clients spiraling down a rabbit hole of debt. And to make matters worse, this entire enterprise was buoyed by your tax dollars. So regardless of macroeconomic patterns, this dubious marketplace remains untouchable. What was this ethically questionable industry? I worked in higher education. More specifically, I worked in college admissions and financial aid. Many of my former admissions colleagues and peers, all of whom I consider to be good friends, probably take offense to how I characterize their livelihood. But I would have to back in the day when I was in the thick of it. I took pride in my work, but it was taxing, pun unintended. I spent nearly 1/4 of my year on the road, living in hotels, visiting high schools, attending college fairs, and pitching my school as the place to be for unsuspecting 17-year-olds. This gig was not only physically exhausting, but also morally. What once seemed like an altruistic mission, helping the young people of today become the leaders of tomorrow, transformed into a much more realpolitik mindset. Slowly, I realized my job wasn't to empower young people, but to get them and their parents to commit to paying a very large sum of money, either by cash or credit, for a little piece of paper that continues to diminish in value. I always considered myself to be on the up and up with the families with whom I worked. I never lied to my students or their families. I always represented my institution truthfully. I always worked hard to get them the most bang for their buck. However, it didn't matter how ethical I behaved as an admissions counselor. The entire system is broken. Moral hazard has run amok in the college system. After a few years, I came to the unfortunate realization that I was no better than a car salesman. What follows are just a few examples why car lots behave more ethically than colleges and universities. Markups. The markup on college tuition is astronomically higher than the markup on a car. Product pricing always comes with a little fudge room. Many refer to it as markup. This is just a given in the world of sales and retail. That wiggle room allows sales reps with the ability to offer one-time deals, which serve as an effective call to action when closing the deal. In the higher ed world, we've referred to this wiggle room as discounting. Discounting is the act of advertising an astonishingly high rate of tuition than bargaining with scholarships, grants, loans, and other forms of financial aid until the buyer finds a less painful price point that is still astonishingly high, but still lower than before. Sticker shock is a very real thing in the college admissions gig. During my tenure in higher education, annual tuition at my college was roughly $30,000 per year, but it didn't stop there. Cost of living also included $4,000 for room, $4,000 for board, $750 for books, and $250 for other residual expenses, insurance, vehicle maintenance, etc. The family should include in their annual budget. When it's all said and done, the annual amount exceeded the $40,000 waterline, and this was only for 1 year. Plus, to make matters worse, tuition always rises as if it is Newton's lesser known fourth law of motion. On average, college jack up tuition roughly 5% per year. The board of trustees at my college, for example, was committed to generous increases that didn't exceed 2%. But don't worry, I told parents, nobody ever pays the full price. The discount rate varied for each student, but it was easy to cut tuition in half through discounting so that it didn't seem as bad. A car dealer's markup is roughly 5% above the manufacturer's suggested retail price. For my college, that markup was 115%. Sadly, this markup is average across all the higher ed industry. My college was not unique in this upcharge. The institutional discount rate is universal in the higher ed world and has steadily increased nationwide. A 2015 to 2016 report by the National Association of College and University Business Officers estimated that institutional discount rates peaked at 48.6% that year, a trend that deemed to be not sustainable. While some schools rely upon hefty endowments, the majority of schools are classified as tuition-driven. The same NACUBO study reported that 10.8% of the institutional grants were funded by endowments in 2015 to 2016. This means that dollars received from incoming students are then recycled as scholarships for future students. American higher education is caught in a vicious cycle of robbing sophomore Peter to pay freshman Paul, but most families feel like they are getting the deal of the century thanks to tuition discounts. Car dealerships don't require a tax return to determine how much to charge you for that car. The discount rate is a result of the backward math that takes place during financial aid season. All families seeking financial aid must first complete a free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. Hopefully, the irony of the word free isn't lost on everybody. For those who have had the pleasure of applying for financial aid, consider it the equivalent of filing out your tax return again. FAFSA requires a detailed accounting of a family's financial situation before any financial aid is allocated. Once a FAFSA is completed, a family's estimated family contribution, EFC, is determined, this is the end result of a convoluted algorithm that determines a family's ability to pay for college. Colleges and universities subtract the EFC from the cost of attendance, tuition, room, board, books, etc., to determine need. As many families will attest, the EFC overestimates a family's ability to pay for college. It is a one-size-fits-all metric that does not take into account regional cost of living, utilitized, outdated budgeting estimates, makes many illogical assumptions, and ignores situational expenses, for example, large medical bills. There are some means to appeal and adjust mitigation circumstances, but it does little to shave points off the EFC. But name any other product or service that evaluates your ability to pay before setting a price. You would be hard-pressed to find other examples that don't involve market distortions created by government intrusion. Healthcare, which conveniently brings us to the next point. Bailouts. The auto industry was only bailed out once. Higher ed makes it an annual tradition. Even one bailout is too much, in my opinion. The auto industry was on the receiving end of a $79.7 billion handout following the financial crisis of 2008. Though monies were paid back, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the program still cost taxpayers roughly $14 billion. Meanwhile, the post-secondary market is bailed out every single year. In 2014 alone, $133.8 billion in federal dollars were allocated to over 5,000 post-secondary institutions to be used as financial aid. This aid, however, doesn't come in the form of a federal check made out to a needy student. Colleges and universities are the beneficiaries of these funds. Once enrollment counts for the upcoming year are finalized, funds are issued to the colleagues who then in turn manage how they are distributed. And this annual bailout is fueling rising costs. Studies found that federal funding directly contributes to inflated tuition pricing. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York found that every dollar awarded by Pell Grants resulted in a 55-cent increase in the sticker price of college tuition for students. Anecdotally, the Board of Trustees at my school waited for Pell Grant amounts to be sent before they officially set our school's tuition rate. This residual effect, in conjunction with federal student aid, has continued to inflate the price of tuition year after year. Throwing more public money toward higher education has created an opposite effect on the affordability of college. According to inflation-adjusted figures, public investment in higher education is 10 times higher now than it was in 1960. For perspective, military spending is only 1.8 times higher. Meanwhile, college tuition is 1,120% higher during roughly the same time period. Consider the practice of federal financial aid as the equivalent of TARP, the auto bailout, another form of corporate welfare doled out to too large to fail institutions who demand that taxpayers foot the bill for their failing business models. And I'm going to stop there, but I urge you to finish the article over at fee.org. Selling higher education is sleazier than selling used car. And the article goes on, and he talks about a possible give me a second here. A potential bubble, and he also talks about so far there's basically no end in sight. Again, go check that out, fee.org. And I've talked about this before, you know, the prices have become so inflated, and then the courses that, you know, people are doing that really are not providing anything beneficial for the students being part of that. You know, how many people do you see with some sort of business degree? With the amount of people I see with business degree, and really some of them will admit that, yeah, I got a business degree, I know nothing about business. That's why I don't, you know, they're not even, you know, a foreman or nothing. You know, they're down the totem pole because they wanted the degree. They hope they'll get paid a little more just because they have it. And then they look smart by not trying to be too far up the ladder. It benefits them. But how much? And what kind of debt do they incur? And then what kind of debt do we as taxpayers incur because of that? I'll tell you what. I know because of my home taxes that a lot of people get screwed out about 3/4 of their taxes, and maybe more when at a state level. Definitely if you're a single, you know, person without kids or any major write-off, you can get screwed out of taxes. Why? Because, well, you got to flip the bill for everybody else. And that's not fair. So, you know, I really urge people to raise their kids more of a way that might encourage self-education, self-awareness, and free thinking. Give them true education, because then they not only can talk about what they know or wave a piece of paper, but when it comes down to it, they can prove themselves at every, you know, challenge they come across. And I'm kind of glad I was raised that way. You know, I get people that want to act like I'm some superhuman, and it drives me nuts. I'm like, no, you got to put effort into what you do, no matter if you like it or not. If you're going to do it, put effort into it. That, and then kind of common sense, I really believe. Now, I do want to cover a little bit when it comes to one thing that I talk about a lot, others, other libertarians, and Tea Parties talk about, and that's the Federal Reserve. First, I'm going to play a small clip from We Are Change. What will happen with the U.S. Federal Reserve under Donald Trump?
Luke Radowski of FairChange.org here in Acapulco, Mexico, and today we have the distinct honor and pleasure to be joined by the legend, G. Edward Griffin. Now, me and G. Edward Griffin, we've been speaking at conferences for 10 years. We never really spoke. This is the first time we're actually getting to speak. And if you haven't heard about G. Edward Griffin, you haven't heard about the biggest problem that humanity faces, and that is the private Federal Reserve banking system. Some say it's quasi, some say it's that. But G. Edward Griffin really broke it down in such important ways that other people haven't before. And I thank you for the work that you've been doing. And I would really love your insight about the current state of the Federal Reserve. We're seeing Donald Trump in office, who supported verbally the audit the Federal Reserve bill, while at the same time appointing people for Secretary of Treasury that don't approve of this, and we're working with Goldman Sachs and we're working with other bankers. So currently today, what is the state of the Federal Reserve? What's really happening?
Well, I have to say that I think that nothing has really changed so far, and we all have great hopes that it will. But to put this into context, I want to explain that I'm not, what I might say, what comes to my mind would be totally off the cuff, but what I might say is not either a pro or con, Donald Trump. It's just an observation of what the state is and what the history is and so forth. And so I have to put that in context, which is that we have probably seen at least 30 or 40 years of political action changing from one party to the next, and one candidate to the next. We've heard a lot of rhetoric, a lot of campaign speeches, and there's one thing that emerges from that if you really stand back and look at it, and that is that there is a disconnect between what candidates say and what they do once they're elected. Okay, now this isn't Trump I'm talking about. I'm talking about all of them. So it should be no surprise if we should find that there's a disconnect between the speeches that Mr. Trump has made and his appointments. This is, what else is new? Mm-hmm. So, no, okay, and that's the context. I think the rest of that is that politicians, whether we like them or not, whether they're on our side or the other team or whatever, they spend a lot of time and money conducting polls to find out what's bothering people, what's on their mind, what do they want to hear, and then they hire, well, I don't know whether Mr. Trump hires speechwriters, but most of them hire speechwriters to say what the public wants to hear. Okay, so in other words, I'm kind of a skeptic in this area. I think the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is who are you selecting for your key positions. And so what I see in that area is that on domestic issues, really like, whether we should have immigration, unlimited immigration, all that kind of stuff, Mr. Trump is doing a lot of the things that he said he would do, and he's easing some of the tax issues. He's really doing good things. Some of his executive orders are kind of encouraging, except I'm not a big fan of executive orders. I think the way things should be done in a country like ours, a representative government or state anyway, that Congress should be doing these things. We don't need a king or a presidente to do these things by decree, but nevertheless, it shows that there's an awareness of the things that people want. But now when you shift off of that category and look at foreign policy, bigger picture on the globe, the wars, the globalism, the loss of American sovereignty, the drift toward an international currency, and now we're talking about the banking system. And in those areas, which in my view are probably even more important than the domestic issues, as important as they are, it looks like the Trump administration looks like it's going in business as usual. So that's my observation. I don't know if it'll continue or not, but I suspect it will.
To me, it's always very important to be skeptical no matter what happens and always question authority. And we have seen a large portion of the alternative media kind of go into cheerleader mode and not really be as the accountable force that they used to be. And when we're dealing with issues like the Federal Reserve, we're dealing with a very powerful, serious threat. Can you, I know this is a very open-ended kind of question, can you talk about the seriousness and the importance of the U.S. Federal Reserve?
Well, it's hard to quantify that. It's okay. Well, it's hard to quantify that because money is sort of one of those things you don't think much about, except when you don't have enough of it. You say, I wish I had more of it. But if you look at it from a sort of a aerial view and say, well, what important? How important is money in society? Well, it's perhaps the most important thing of all because it's in the middle of every human transaction, except for the voluntary ones. But most people pay for services or goods. Every transaction, you're exchanging money. Now, if the hidden hand, if you want to get conspiratorial on this, if there were a group of people that you don't even know by name, you never heard of them, and they're controlling the value of that money and how much of it is being issued, how much interest is paid on it when people borrow it, they have an indirect, hidden control over your life and maybe 50 to 100 transactions a day. And so it's incredibly important because it determines not only what you can afford to do, it determines how you are compensated for your efforts. It determines who gets most of the benefits, because if you play the rules and you do the things that this hidden hand likes, well, you get the goodies. And if you don't, well, all of a sudden you're looking around for more money. You can't get credit. You can't, and so forth. So yeah, it's incredibly important because it affects our lives, and more than our lives, it gets specific about it. And more than our lives, it gets specific about that. It affects our financial security and our freedom, really. Because if you don't have financial independence, you have to be dependent on somebody else. And who might that be, do you suppose? Well, the government's happy to step in and take care of you. Oh, you poor fellow, we're going to take care of we'll give you a better income. We'll guarantee you a minimum wage. We'll take care of your health care. We'll pay the rent on your house. So we'll get you a job. We'll provide your education. But you better do what we say or else you're through. So it's incredibly important for financial security and our freedom.
Because nothing is free. And I think it's also important to highlight that the system rules because of our participation. And if we weren't participating, holding up that belief, which is the only thing that's holding up their whole system, I think there would be a big change, because we could change that at any moment. What do you think about some of the solutions that people are offering, whether it's Rand Paul calling for an audit of the Federal Reserve or people calling for cryptocurrencies? What do you see as a potential solution to the bigger problems that we face?
Well, to be very specific, I think there's only
It's Mexico, so we got a little sound interruption, but it's okay. We'll deal with it.
That was a truck going by, I think, or a bus or something. Yeah, I think that there's only one solution to the Federal Reserve problem, and that's to abolish the Federal Reserve. You know, if we don't need to audit the Fed. We know what it's doing. It's right out in the open. It's in your face. You can read about it. It's the charter tells you it has the legal right to steal. So that's what it's doing. It's plundering the American people by creating money out of nothing, charging interest on it, and devaluating the purchasing power of the monetary unit, and they're raking off all that difference. So we know what it's doing. What do we have to? Do you want to audit the mafia? Just figure out what you want to do with it. We know what the mafia does. So my theory is we don't need to audit it. We need to abolish it. So any of these other suggestions are kind of political games. People come up with these solutions because they think, well, if I said I wanted to abolish the Fed, it might sound extreme. Yes, it sounds extreme because we have an extreme problem, and extreme problems have only extreme solutions. But politicians don't want that because they're afraid they'll lose some votes. I can understand that. I can understand. You know, that's why I would never be any good in politics, because I'd say it the way it is. Yeah. If you don't like it, well, then, you know, I'm sorry, brother, but that's it. Yeah. But politicians cannot do that, I suppose. Although I think they could, but they don't. Yeah. So that's my view on that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of control. There's a lot of extortion. There's a lot of other surrounding things that not many people know about that you were able to put in great detail in your books and in your lectures and everything that you have done throughout your tremendous career. Last question is it possible? Can we do it?
Of course it's possible. Everything is possible. If we just have enough desire, enough motive power to do it. It's not easy. There's the difference between possible and easy. And in a way, it is easy, too, because all we have to do is create an awareness among the American people of what the scam really is. Now, that's not so easy because people don't want to read, they don't want to hear it, and so forth. But it's simple, let's just say it that way. Once the people understand, then they'll put pressure on their political so-called leaders. They're not really leaders, they're followers, but they'll do whatever the public wants, you know. And then all of a sudden, the people who are calling for an audit of the Fed will say, we ought to abolish the Fed, see. Mm-hmm. And then the next step is to actually do it, you see. We've had this before, but say, yeah, we should abolish the Fed, and then it comes time for the vote. Oh, well, I changed my mind, you know. So it all starts, though, with public awareness to build that public pressure, political pressure on these elected people, and then it can happen.
Like we've seen Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz kind of capitulate on that issue when it came up to vote, watering down the bill as well. Is there anything else you would like to say about the current status of the Federal Reserve or Donald Trump, or anything that you're doing that people should be aware of?
Well, yeah, I'd like to say these are interesting and exciting times, and even though it's a little scary, because I think we're coming down to the point, we're coming to the finish line. Let's say, I don't think this contest, this debate, this conflict can go on much longer. One side or the other is going to have to totally capitulate. And I used to think, I'm afraid that freedom is going to be on the downside. It's going to be the downside dog. And, you know, the big dog on top is going to be collectivism and statism and so forth. But now it's beginning to look like the underdog might get back up on top, and the fight is continuing now. And, of course, the collectivists know that, and there's nothing more dangerous than a wounded bear. So it's coming to a head, and I think we're going to see it very soon. So it's exciting. It's a little scary, but I'm glad to know that we have at least, we're in the scrap, you know, we're in the fight. We still have a chance if we can just reach out to our friends and neighbors and tell them, come on, wake up. It's you we're trying to help, not just us.
I couldn't agree with you more, 110%. And it all starts with sharing information, sharing knowledge, getting the information out there. And you can do that by sharing this video. And thank you so much for all the amazing work you have done throughout your career. The links to G. Edward Griffin will be in the description below.
We Are Change, wearechange.org, and We Are Change on YouTube. Subscribe, check them out. G. Edward Griffin, if you haven't read the book, Creature from Jekyll Island, if you want to know anything about the Federal Reserve, the monetary policy, and what's going on with the dollar, why it keeps losing value, and it takes more and more dollars to buy the same type of goods, same amount of goods. That's your number one book to go read. Check it out. And it's Creature from Jekyll Island. G. Edward Griffin. And it's crazy to even talk about this because, you know, I was introduced to, you know, what the Fed is and what it does and stuff back in the early 2000s. I become awoke to it. And when I look at the youth now, and I just don't see any ambition, even, you know, I look back and a lot of the youth from my era, there's only a fraction, and it's even less now, that could even tell you what the Federal Reserve is. And you know, this is something that continues from generation to generation. We keep losing our history. And, you know, you go to try to turn on the TV and they're not talking about the Federal Reserve. Can you believe the little goof up on a damn award show is like breaking news? We're investigating. This is unacceptable. It's a freaking award show. Like, the rest of the world really does not give a shit. I don't know anybody that's going, I just can't believe that happened. They should investigate that. This is just unbelievable, except for, you know, your hipsters that are all into what's going on in Hollywood. And hipster as a very, very broad term, not trying to single certain people out that dress a certain way and call them the hipster. I'm talking about the people that want to be hip to what's going on in Hollywood, those hipsters. Other than that, no one really cares. It's not that big a deal. You don't need to investigate. You know, who cares? You know, if you want to investigate, whatever. We don't care about. We don't need to hear about it. We need to have news that's reporting things about the Federal Reserve and not just placating to the system while trying to sell things off to the public. And that's the issue that you see. And, you know, it's one thing to try to sell people entertainment, but even our entertainment, you know, I don't watch people's movies and care to know what their political opinion is. I'm glad when I do hear of one that shares a libertarian-ish philosophy, but I don't really need to know or care to know. But Hollywood has become a tool for ideology and politics. And it's not why we watch your movies, but playing that card could be the reason why people stop watching your movies. Again, G. Edward Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island. You want to learn about the Federal Reserve monetary policy. That's a great book. And, you know, there's one great way that you can check out that book and buy it and also help out, you know, alternative media, being UCY. If you go to ucy.tv, scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the Amazon button. I know a lot of people like to buy books through Amazon because you can get books pretty cheap through Amazon. A lot cheaper than usually going to a major bookstore. If you want to support your local bookstore, definitely go down there and ask them to, if they don't have it in stock, to order it for you. You know, supporting the mom and pop bookstores. I do believe in that. Or even if you want to go library, ask your library if they have one. Maybe not at that branch, but maybe at another branch. But if you want to buy a copy, go to Amazon. And if you do it by going to ucy.tv and clicking the Amazon button at the bottom, you'll get the same great price, same great shipping rate. And at the same time, UCY gets a little kickback, and that helps cover operating costs on the network's end. To operate this is not free, and the network is generous enough to let the host have the service for free. A lot of these internet networks that you hear about or have listened to, they tend to charge to have a slot on their network. UCY is not that way. UCY has had hosts contact them and have also contacted others that either had the ability or the want to start their own radio broadcasts. And I think UCY has a really, really good collection of theories and philosophies, ideology, politics, and voices. And I think the best thing about UCY is, even though you might have a lot of differences, I believe every host here is trying to search for the truth and to really progress the message of freedom for individuals. Hopefully we can get there one day. I think another issue that we run into is, what does freedom look like for everyone? And I think that's a message that has been missed for a while now. Because if you go, well, we want to know what freedom is for the gay couple that's getting married, you can't dismiss the diehard Christian that happens to have a little cake business, and they go, well, I'll bake it for you. I don't want to cater, at the event or be a part of the event. Or maybe I respect your decision to get married, but I choose not to bake a cake because it kind of goes against my religion. Or you have to respect the freedom of every person. And I think there's also malicious actions. To go around and torment someone is a malicious action. But that also, again, plays both ways. If they find out, oh, you're a gay person getting married, they can't go around tormenting you or inciting violence against you. But when they choose not to bake a cake for your gay wedding, you also can't turn around and, harass them, incite violence on them. We got to teach, once again, what hypocrisy is and what the mutual respect is when it comes to freedom. Again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Stay tuned here on UCY. Great broadcast coming up after this. And don't forget, again, go to ucy.tv and click the Amazon button if you decide to shop through Amazon, and that helps UCY get a little kickback. Same cost for you, but UCY, again, gets a little kickback. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY. Great broadcast coming up. And I will be back this Friday. So hopefully I will have everything fixed by then. Take care.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to